colleague and I were able to reconstruct a rather interesting pattern of our evolutionary history. It turns out, while we all apes and monkeys arose in Africa about 25 million years ago, around 20 million years ago, one species of ape migrated out of Africa into Asia. And over the next 10 million years, that species evolved into gibbons, orangutans, and ultimately into our common ancestor, which actually comes from Turkey and Greece and Spain and other places in Western Asia, which migrated back into Africa, giving rise to humans, chimps, and gorillas. And then, as you know, later, only 50,000 years ago or so, we migrated back out of Africa. So we had an initial African origin, an Asian period, if you will, or a European and Asian period to our history, a new exclusively African part of our history, and now we're back all over the world. And we've tied that into the geological record and all of these things. But we would not have been able to do this without the genetics. There are other things that we've been able to answer genetically. Some morphologists have liked to argue that chimpanzees are not our closest living relatives, but rather that orangutans are. There's been a series of articles and books referring to, these guys because they can have long hair. They're the only other ape that can possibly have red hair and all of these things. But the genetic evidence is so overwhelming in favor of us being related to the African chimps, then the gorillas, and finally, more distantly, the orangutans, I've published papers on this since 1991 was the first paper. So when this hypothesis came out, it caused a huge amount of controversy, and I had the great pleasure of being interviewed by John Oliver in my lab on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, in which they made fun of the other guy who said orangutans were more closely related. We have also looked at South American primates, where we have lots of really beautiful partial skulls, and some people like to link these fossil species that are over 20 million years directly to living species of New World monkeys today living in Central and South America. Other paleontologists say, no, they're all an extinct side branch, a dead end, and all the living monkeys are more closely related. We tested this using genetic data, and our test came firmly down on the side that all of those 20 million year old fossils have nothing to do with the living fossils today. And the living fossils, all of the living species, all arose from common ancestry in the last 20 million years. And again, using this stochastically clicking so-called molecular clock, we're able to reinterpret the fossil record. Recently, Artie, the new fossil hominin that was discovered, was published, and in last month's National Geographic, the authors who discovered Ardipithecus published their timeline, but again, it totally conflicts with the genetic timeline. So either we have to reinterpret the fossil record as they did it, or we have to figure out better ways of interpreting the genetic data. My guess is, and I happen to be a molecular geneticist, that we're going to have to reinterpret the fossil data. Even the new Neanderthal genome sequence, it is contentious. So that we argued just a few months ago that their conclusion was flawed because they did not sample enough people of African descent. They basically sampled 2 people from all of Africa to represent Africa, and concluded that Neanderthals were more closely related to Europeans and Asians than to Africans. Africans, though, are the most diverse people on the planet. Sampling 2 of them would be like taking a presidential poll of just 2 people from Greenwich Village and saying, that's how the United States is going to vote in an election. And so the project we're proposing, and I'm hoping to work on over the next several years, is to sequence the entire genomes of several thousand African individuals so that we can truly understand the diversity that gave rise to all of the rest of the diversity on the planet today. So I just want to, again, reiterate and stress to you how important that tough, nasty subject of mathematics is, because it forms the basis for almost all of science. And any scientific field that you go into, you're going to have to carry out complex analyses and understand them, complex statistics, you may be doing modeling, and I would throw in, you should try to learn as much as you can about computer programming and how to use and integrate different systems as possible, because there is as great a future in that as there is a sort of wet lab work or chemistry lab work or physics lab work. There is as much work to be done working with the data that other people collect than generating it yourselves. So with that, I can open it up to several minutes of questions. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You said that we were talking about like some places in Mongolia that the chimpanzees there, their HIV is very similar to the HIV of the people there.
Yes.
So in the United States, our HIV is similar to what Mongolia?
It ultimately came from that same source as it spread out of Africa via trade and international travel and so on. It first went to Europe and then jumped to the US. So almost all, probably 99% of the AIDS cases in the US can ultimately be traced back to Central Africa, to a very small region, and in fact to one specific subspecies of chimpanzee. But then, once it got into humans, I mean, chimps don't get on planes and fly around the world. So, you know, they spread it in their local forest, a country or so wide. Humans, once we got it, we spread it throughout the rest of the world because our immune system had never seen anything like it. It's like getting a new version of the flu. It can spread like wildfire because our immune system is just completely unprepared for it. Yes?
You said that the AIDS were like not heavily as our immune system. I think like in several thousand years,
I mean, it could take, you know, 500,000 to 2 million years. I don't want to wait for that. But, you know, if it got worse to the point that, you know, people were dying in significant numbers, as they are in some regions, and if there are people, and we know of some people who seem to have survived a very long time with it, or who never actually caught it and yet should have, if those people have more children than the people who die of HIV over literally tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, you could see an immune population of humans finally appear. We can't wait for that. In the back there.
Could you give us like a general outline of some of the mathematical algorithms to like analyze the data?
Well, a lot of what we're starting to do uses maximum likelihood approaches and even Bayesian statistics. Bayesian statistics is a place where if you know a little bit of information and you feed that in, you can build upon that, sort of bootstrap off of that to generate results. Other of our algorithms just require sheer brute force, looking at all the possibilities and then saying which one of all those trillions of possibilities looks the most likely or is